Flick Flag. And that Flick Flag quickly became my like safety watch and safety blanket. And so I wouldn't be able to sleep without it on. I wouldn't be able to shower without it on. It was just I couldn't leave the house without that watch on, and it just became a habit, right? And so it wasn't until obviously I started my first company when I was 15. It was like PR marketing
In Shanghai.
In Shanghai. And I saved up enough money to buy a Hamilton when I was 16. It's like 70% of all my money.
We do Hamilton, right? In Japan. Don't we have Hamilton?
No,
We didn't we before?
I don't think so. Go on.
Yeah, and so bought that Hamilton. It was like 70% of my bank account back then, but I was 16, so it was okay. And then that quickly spiraled out of control, I guess. And then growing up in Shanghai, being a young person, like especially back then when VPNs weren't so accessible, like in firewall and all of that, coupled with the fact that there wasn't much watch stuff on the internet anyways in the first place. Like no one was posting watches on Instagram. It was just like old school forums, like Rolex forums, Time Zone,
So how long
Purist
ago was
Pro.
this?
This was like maybe 2012
Okay.
or like 2012 to 2015,
Okay.
around that time.
Okay.
And so because of that, it was very lonely being a young person in this hobby, especially because everyone else my age, I mean, they only talked about, who they liked in school and stuff like that, like their crushes, and they didn't talk about, no one gave a shit about watches, except for me. And so it was very lonely, and especially growing up in China, there weren't many collecting communities at all in China in the first place, because back then, like almost 10 years ago, the Chinese collecting community was still very immature, I guess. Like, they were just they only like gold and diamonds and stuff like that, heavy watches. Like, it was really just about showing off. It wasn't really about craft, tradition, and history. But now it's obviously shifted very much so towards that. But back then it wasn't like that. And so growing up in China, that made it extra lonely. And so I started an Instagram page in my first year in college in Shanghai. And it was anonymous for 3 years. And I just wanted to use that as like an outlet to share my passion with other people, because I would message all the Instagram accounts before with my personal account, and they would all ignore me because my name was like Austin. She wasn't a watch page or anything, so they would just ignore me. So that's why I created that account, so they would take me seriously. And I didn't disclose my age because I was like 18 or 19. I was like, no one's gonna take me seriously, and so it was just anonymous for like 3 years. And then I eventually started to garner up more followers, and what was really weird was AP asked me to start premiering watches for them on my Instagram account, back when I only had like 30,000 followers or something. And that was something that was really weird because they've never done that before. It's like, instead of giving a watch to traditional press, in a press release and whatever with renders of the watch, like, traditional what brands do, they didn't do that. They just premiered it on my Instagram, and they gave me permission to do so, and that was really weird. And so that obviously, coupled with me trying to improve my photography, I still don't think I'm that good at watch photography at all. It's just, I guess I'm just consistent, just posting all the time, like for years, right? But that eventually led to me collaborating with AP for the China edition, which I'm actually wearing today, which was crazy, still surreal. That was last year.
That was last year.
Last January, right before COVID, 1 week before COVID, in Beijing. And that was the first time in history that a luxury watch brand collaborated with a collector for a commercial release. And so it was 88 pieces. I designed the watch. And the first piece was auctioned off for charity. And back then, because the watch market still didn't blow up early last year, it auctioned for 300,000 francs, which back at the time was the second most expensive Royal Oak ever sold at auction, and it was all donated to charity, which I thought, that was like imperative, like we need to do this, and AP liked that idea. And then basically throughout this whole time, like being a collector, I've been meeting brands. I was passionate. Like when I started my relationship with AP, it was never commercial. It was just, I could afford one watch at this time, and I told them straight up, I cannot afford another watch for a very long time when I was 18. But I was like, but I love your brand so much. But I did this to many brands, right? Because I was interested. I was genuinely interested in so many brands because I'm so passionate about it. And I guess being in China, being able to speak English really gave me an advantage, because when all these brand CEOs or whatever would visit China, the clients wouldn't be able to speak English, and it would just kind of be me there, even though I was never a VIP at that time. the brands would always invite me to these events because I would be able to communicate with the CEO. That was the sole reason. It wasn't because I was a big spender or anything, right? It was just because I was passionate. And so throughout that process, fast forward a few years to like now, when I had the idea of WristCheck, I serendipitously met my business partner, Sean, who came from Hypebeast. His son was actually interviewing me for Hypebeast. His son was 5 years old at the time. And then we met, told him my idea about WristCheck, and it's pretty much the whole idea is to inspire the next generation of watch enthusiasts and to bring in as many people into the hobby as possible. And that's the mission. And we achieve that by having a fully transparent exchange. And so buyers know what sellers netted and sellers know what buyers paid. They know what we as a platform made. We authenticate the watches ourselves or with brands. And so we're actually working with maybe 5 or 6 watch brands to be their official pre-owned like partner. And so they will give extended warranties and stuff on even old watches that they refurbish. And those are mainly independent brands. And we also want to have a very easy selling process and buying process for everyone. So pretty much just providing 100% peace of mind. I've gotten scammed before buying watches online. Like I got a dial that was dented. The guy was like, "Oh, it didn't ship like that," but of course it did. You don't. A watch doesn't dent when the dial doesn't dent when you ship it, you know. And so it's like I got scammed a few times as well. I've had terrible experiences, and also I've experienced losing a lot of my money on watches. And that's also why we make 8 to 12% on every watch, which is lower than auction houses, as I'm sure you know, and lower than what dealers make on average. And so because of that, it makes watch collecting sustainable. Because that's something that didn't exist for me at that time. I would take a 30 to 40% hit every time I would sell a watch because I would only know one dealer that would lowball me because that's most ordinary people, or if they even know anyone, right? They would get lowballed, sell a watch, but if you do that twice or 3 times, you've lost all of your original investment or the original money that you put into the watch. It's not sustainable. Whereas with 8 to 12%, it's totally sustainable. You buy the watch. If you're buying right watches, they go up way more than 8 to 12% a year. You sell it, buy something else. You can keep on upgrading and keep on upgrading. Your collection grows and grows and grows. And so it's a very opposite. We want to foster the lifetime client. We don't want to just foster a one-time sale and transaction. And it's more about this holistic thing. We're also offering insurance. And so we're going to be the first company in Hong Kong offering very simple B2C insurance for watches. So I can insure that watch as well. And it costs 0.6 to 1.35% a year of the market value or invoice value you get to pick, because some watches you would want market value, because if they're 3 times retail, of course we want market value, but if it's not, if it's below retail, we want invoice value. And we're also working on launching watch collateral, so we'll be able to be like a bank for watches, give up to 70% LTV on watches, and just pretty much everything that I wish existed when I started out collecting, I'm trying to provide for the current generation and the next generation of collectors, and that's basically the concept of WristCheck.
Is this your first store?
Yes.
Why Hong Kong?
Very easy. Hong Kong is still objectively the commercial capital of watches on earth by far. Like nothing comes close to it. And the people that I think are not super entrenched into the industry based in Asia might not see that, right? Like if you just look at last year's numbers, first time that Hong Kong wasn't number 1, right? Number 3. First of all, the fact that Hong Kong, a place of 7 million people, is number 1 every year, and they sell more watches than the entire US combined, and they sell more watches than the entire Europe combined, in itself is just remarkable already.
But it's not obviously not to the local population, so it must be to the tourists, right?
No. So last year, Hong Kong was number 3 globally. Tourism fell by 99.999%, and Hong Kong still sold more watches last year than all of Europe combined. Local.
But it's still a currency, right?
What do you mean?
Still something that's taken in and out of the border to kind of transfer.
Not last year.
It's not cross-border?
Last year, not the new watches. Not the new watches that are sold. And we're not even talking about secondhand. Secondhand Hong Kong is the largest market on earth by far.
But even
These are new watches that are produced in 2020. Last year, Hong Kong was still the world's number 3 watch
But it's
market.
not cross-border even then?
You can't, we're in this business, you can't ship anything to China in the past year. Nothing.
Really?
Nothing to the mainland. It's like dead. Like COVID right now in China is like, the past year you can't ship anything there. Even shipping out is really
So
hard.
your clientele here is purely
Local.
Hong Kong people?
Local and some international.
Yeah.
Why do Hong Kong people buy so many watches then? Here.
Because for young people, I mean, oh, another thing to note, like 80% of our clientele is they're under 35.
Well,
How can they afford it? I mean,
That's the thing. Young people
How-
have money, but brands have never taken young people seriously. They've never
Yeah.
taken me seriously. I've experienced this firsthand. I got treated, actually, just a month ago at a Patek in Hong Kong. I walked in and they thought I was a delivery boy. They were like, "Oh, deliveries are on that side." Like, you know what I mean? But that's literally what young people experience. If you're young and if you're non-full Asian, you get treated like extra shit. If you're fully white, you get treated like shit on the bottom of your shoe, right? Like in Hong Kong, that's just how it is. It's just like in Asia, right?
so I guess the concept, your store concept, is really for younger people, right?
Not really. I mean, it's not even. I don't even class it as a store. I call it the Rich Tech experience. It's an offline manifestation of our online platform, which is going to constantly improve.
is this a pop-up or is it
No, it's
a-
permanent.
It's 3
It's
years.
permanent.
Okay. So what is the average retail price of the watches you're selling? I assume most of them are online. but
Well,
is that-
most of them are online. Average. I mean, we have everything from 30K to like 10 million, but I guess the average is like 500K.
500K.
5 to 700K.
And after Hong Kong, what's the biggest online? Where do you ship most to? Japan?
Well, we want to. Oh, after Hong Kong.
After Hong Kong.
It's kind of a spread. I mean, like US, Europe. I mean, a lot of the buyers actually buy it and they tell us to just keep it for them.
But
So,
what about in
like,
terms
we
of
just
that-
hold it.
in terms of Asia? Where do you are your customers coming from? Mainland China second, or
We have
from
0
Japan?
mainland customers so far,
Okay.
and we cannot wait for the borders to open because then they're all gonna come.
Your
over.
platform is in Chinese as well, or just?
It will be when we open it. So next steps is mainland China and Southeast Asia. So like Vietnam,
Southeast Asia's
Indonesia,
better.
Philippines, Thailand. They
Interesting.
are so underserved. There are so many watches locally in those markets. They have nothing.
So you go south rather than north.
Yeah, because I mean we do both, but it's just like with watches, it's such a hard thing to penetrate. You know what I mean? It's like the barrier of entry for the watch industry trying to do something in the watch industry with some sort of legitimacy is very hard to build in a very short amount of time. And so we just need to enter those markets. It's not like someone can just open a nice store and have watches. How are they going to source the watches? How are they going to consign? Like all of our stock here is consigned. We paid 0 Hong Kong for our stock. Right, we have over 200 million Hong Kong inventory. We paid 0 for it. It's like that's all about trust, right?
So how do you explain this very young demographics who are buying from you?
It's very simple because for us, we experienced a time where every single watch was pretty, besides the Rolex Steel Daytona and the Steel Green Hulk, besides those 2 watches, everything else on the market was going for below retail. That was just 5-6 years ago, right? Pretty much. Only vintage watches were the good investments. The modern watches were terrible investments, always, right? And so you walk out of Patek with a Nautilus 5711, 6 years ago you'd lose 25% instantly, right? And so, you know, because of that, we lived through that time. And so it's a really hard pill to swallow for people that have experienced that to now see, oh my god, a 5711 is going for 1 million or 900,000 Hong Kong, whereas 7 years ago you could pick it up for like 175K, right? So for people that have lived through that, it's very hard for them to buy at market. The problem is the next gen, the people that are getting it now, they've never lived through that. They lived through a period of lining up when they were 15, 16 years old, overnight outside Foot Locker for the newest Air Jordan 1 release or the newest Yeezy drop. And they were used to having those shoes be retailing for 150 USD, 180 USD, and then selling for 1,000 USD on StockX or eBay. So they already have this hype culture mentality built into them. But it's just right now they're making more money, they're older, and what is the natural progression to sneakers? It's a watch, right? And it's especially right now in this metaverse thing that we're experiencing. I mean, this crazy like world that we're experiencing of NFTs and like all of these intangibles. A watch is something that's very tangible, right? And it's like, and for them, it's like, it just resonates with them a lot. They also view it as something that combats inflation, especially in the past few years, if you're buying the right models. It's very interesting. I mean, the new generation as well, it's like, you know, 40, 50 years ago, if you were moved to Hong Kong, New York, Tokyo, and you went to a good school, you graduated, and you got a good job at an investment bank or a law firm, you work for a few years, you can easily pay for a down payment for an apartment in Hong Kong or Tokyo or New York 40 years ago, in terms of